First News with Keeler in the morning on WIBX and WIBX950.com.
Chief Physician Executive at MVHS, Dr. Ken Hall. Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing this morning?
We're doing good. So did you know the answer to the free money question? I hope you will have said yes.
I actually did.
I was going to say, if it's a medical question and Andrew knows it, I think we all assume, Dr. Hall, that you knew what the answer was. It's kind of amazing here. What do you remember? Anything that struck you as odd or interesting about development of the polio vaccine? I mean, it was 67 years ago, and I know that was before your time. But based on what we know about vaccines today and looking back at polio, anything stick out?
So, a couple things. So, first of all, there were actually two polio vaccines. There was one that was an injectable vaccine, and then there was another one that it was the oral one that, for those of us of a certain age, remember it being on a sugar cube that we took. So it was interesting that they did two, and they found that actually the oral one, at least in its form, at least relative to the first formulation of the injectable, was better. But then they obviously reconfigured the injectable really to make it much fall in line with what the oral one was. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is what you mentioned, which is that it was really the first time, or certainly on a large scale, the first time that the double-blind, what we call the double-blind placebo-controlled trials, or the randomized trials, were used on a large-scale basis, and are now really the way that we do significant evaluations, really, for anything from a scientific medical standpoint.
Let me ask you this about it's as you mentioned, the now standard double-blind method, which is when the patient and the doctor neither knows if the patient is receiving a placebo or the actual vaccine. I guess my question is, on the double-blind element, why does it matter whether the doctor knows if it's the placebo or the real vaccine?
So the reason is because the doctor has an interest in general, because we're human beings, the doctor is going to have an interest in it being a positive evaluation, and so will, in nonverbal but otherwise subtle ways, will be biased toward looking at things that may be either positive or negative, mostly negative, toward it, and tend to discount them. Oh, that's something that we don't have to worry about because it was a one-off, or it was, it was something related to something else that the patient did. Whereas when you don't know what it is, all you're doing is you're collecting all of the data. And then that goes into a data repository, and then once the code is broken, once you've gotten enough and the code is broken, then then you can look and say, okay, so how does this weigh? How do the positives and the negatives weigh for those that got whatever the medication or intervention is versus the placebo? So it's really very it really functions or focuses on the fact that everybody is a human being in the subject or in the experiment, whether it's the individual who's getting either the intervention or the placebo, but also the physicians are.
Sure.
Questions for Dr. Hall, 315-736-0186. We've got Harry in New Hartford on the line with one. Good morning, Harry.
Yes, Dr. Hall, I'd like to inquire about the needles used back when I used to get the polio vaccine, probably in the early 50s, mid-50s. It seemed like they used the needles more than once, and boy, I'll tell you, we did not look forward to getting a polio booster, and I remember that horribly. My brother was 8 years older than I. He has passed, but he did get polio. I was born in 51, and fortunately, the Salk vaccine may have prevented me getting it.
All right.
But anyway, were those needles used how often were they used, and they didn't seem to be as sharp
as the ones for the COVID vaccine. All right, Harry, good question. We'll let you listen to that question off the air or on the air.
Okay.
Thank you, Harry.
Yeah, so I am not aware that they reused the needles for the vaccination. Although I will tell you that in the past, certainly needles were reused. They were sterilized between uses. The issue is that as you don't necessarily realize this, but every time that you use a needle and it goes through anything, whether it's your skin or whether it's the stopper of the vial that the medication that comes in, it does slightly dull the needle. And so over time, I could see where that would be a little more uncomfortable to stuck with that. But I don't know anything particular about the reuse of needles for the polio vaccine.
So another big story in regard to the vaccine, Johnson & Johnson now getting the green light again. I know Onondaga County officials say they will resume distribution of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. What more did you learn about what they discovered and their reuse plan going forward?
Yeah, so, the ACIP, which is the subcommittee that really looks at vaccine safety, and it, really did a very deep dive. As you can tell, it took them, 10 days or so to really look at all of the data. And what they found was that these instances may be, and I really very much emphasize the may be associated with the vaccine, but if they are, it is an exceedingly rare event. And they also came out with guidance, not the ACIP, but the CDC and the FDA came out with some guidance in terms of how to manage it, and put out a significant amount of information about what what to look for. So they, again, what we know is that, there were about 6, give or take, probably a couple more, but certainly not a huge number, over the course of really, hundreds of thousands to millions of doses given. So it is a safe, and relative to getting COVID, which also causes blood clotting, it is much safer to get the vaccine than it is to get COVID, even for that particular subset of problems.
Doc, I saw something, and it looks like the New York Times had an article on this over the weekend. It's something we've talked a little bit about this, that we have almost an excess of vaccine, and the reason being because it seems like fewer people are interested in getting it. The story from the Times this weekend was millions of Americans are skipping their second dose. What do you make of this, and what's your concern with it?
Yeah, so I actually saw that too, and thought about why that might be, and I think I can come up with a couple reasons. Number one is that there is a lot of conversation about the fact that the side effects are worse with the second dose than they are with the first. And if you had some mild ones or even some moderate ones that were pretty uncomfortable for you, then, human nature is that you're going to say, well, I don't think I want to do that again. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect that I would say is that, especially because of what happened with Johnson & Johnson and the fact that, that's just a single dose vaccine, whereas Moderna and Pfizer are the two-dose, and there is no indication that Moderna or Pfizer have these issues. But it's not uncommon for people to say, well, then the vaccines in general are problematic, and so I'm not sure that I want to go back and get my second one. So am I concerned about that? Yes, because we know that, based on studies that have been done looking at the effectiveness of one dose versus two dose for the Moderna and the Pfizer, is that the two-dose regimen was chosen because it actually, results in that 95% effectiveness. And the one dose, the effectiveness is less. It is not zero, but it is less. And so, really to get where we want to get to, we want people to be fully vaccinated.
I want to just say something about this, and this is not a scare tactic. I'm not going to pressure anybody to get the vaccine. I understand everybody's got their own decision to make about this. I'm just going to say why I encourage people to do this. I was out sick a day last week when I got my second shot. I didn't feel great. It lasted it was about 24 hours, okay?
Yeah.
And I didn't feel great. And I will tell you that the entire day, Tuesday, leading up to the shot, I was nervous about it. I was nervous because I'm like, I'm going to have a side effect, and I'm going to feel sick. And nobody wants to feel sick, and nobody wants to feel like garbage. I get it. I'm just telling you, as a guy who went through the 2 shots, and the second dose gave me a reaction. We're going to go over here. I know, it's okay. The second dose gave me a reaction, and I didn't feel good for 24 hours. In hindsight, I would trade a week of how I felt if I could have the last year back. And I understand everybody's got their own personal decision to make, but I'm just saying the fewer and fewer people that get this make it more likely, and it's going to take longer to get over this COVID-19 virus. With given that choice, you deal with what we dealt with for the last year, and how much, let's be honest, how much this sucked for a year. Would you trade that for 24 to 48 hours of not feeling great? That's a personal decision you have to make, but damn, I'd be surprised if you wouldn't trade that.
I agree with that. Wayne in Utica, you have a question for Dr. Hall.
All right, I have a brother-in-law and a sister-in-law that refused to get the vaccine, and then just recently, is like a week and a half ago, both of them got sick. The brother-in-law is getting better. The sister is not getting better, and she refuses to go to the emergency room. Can they help her?
Would
they be able to help her?
Wayne, you said they contracted COVID?
Yeah, well, the brother-in-law is coming off of it. The sister-in-law, she's got it, and she doesn't feel good, and she refuses to go to the emergency room, but says she feels like garbage and is not getting any better. Can the emergency room or anybody do anything for her? Would they be able to help her? In other words, or is it just going to go away on its own?
All right, Wayne, listen off the air. Thanks, man.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a good question, Wayne, and certainly everybody is different. I would strongly encourage her to at least reach out to her primary care provider. Are there interventions that can be done either in the emergency department or elsewhere? Absolutely. There's monoclonal antibodies, which can actually significantly shorten the duration of the disease that does not require people to be hospitalized. But more importantly is, you need to be aware of some of the sometimes subtle initially, but problems that can occur when you get COVID, i.e. the blood clots that we were just talking about. And, we need to be aware, we need to make sure that people are looking for those kinds of things. So I would strongly encourage her to reach out at least to her primary care provider.
Yeah. Dr. Hall, thank you so much, as always. We really appreciate it. Before we let you go, your numbers from Friday?
Yeah, so we had 25 COVID-positive patients here in the system. So, down just a tick from where we were in the middle of the week. Looking around the state, it looks like things might be going in the right direction, really across all regions. So that's a good thing.
All right, Dr. Ken Hall, thank you so much.